You're watching The New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
Since its inception, Amazon Web Services, AWS, has been the best place for customers to build and run open source software in the cloud. AWS is proud to support open source projects, foundations, and partners.
Hey everyone, here we are at the Open Source Summit. It is Wednesday and we're here to talk about databases. The database world is changing so much. I'm looking forward to talk about it with Paul Dix, who's co-founder and CTO of Influx Data, and then Bradley Bebee, who's general manager of Amazon Neptune and Amazon TimesTream. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good, thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So why don't you just give us a little bit of briefing on Influx DB, Influx Data, and then we can talk about how it's integrating with what Amazon's doing. How's that sound?
Sure, sounds good. So we created Influx DB in 2013. It is an open source time series database. So it's useful for measurement data, metrics, sensor data, basically anything you want to track over time and get a real-time view of what's going on in sensors or systems or servers or applications. As I mentioned, there's an open source piece to it. We have the single server that's permissively licensed under MIT license. We've been working on that for many years. And then, of course, we have a commercial product, which is a fork of that is either software or offered as a service.
Great, and Amazon TimesTream, for those who are unfamiliar. What is Amazon TimesTream?
So Amazon TimesTream is AWS's managed time series database service. So we have two different database engines. We have something called TimesTream for Live Analytics, which is a serverless time series database. And then we just recently announced TimesTream for Influx DB, which is a managed version of the open source Influx DB time series database.
So tell me about that fit. You know, why are you doing it? Is it the scalability? Is it the query language that comes with Influx that is part of this? What is it that makes this, worth integrating?
Well, so for me, there's sort of three different things. The first is time series itself. When I think about a problem or understanding what's going on in a system, the first thing I start to do is take observations and measure things over time. And that's fundamentally what time series is. So there's even more and more applications for time series. So we see that as a very interesting and growing space. And the second is that customers love managed open source databases. And so AWS offers more than 25 different managed open source services. And what we found is that customers wanted APIs and performance that they get from the open source packages. And so kind of combining that with our managed service, we thought made a lot of sense for our customers. It would really help customers who want to use time series databases.
So what's the growth and how is it affecting users? And are there new users? Are there existing users who are more accustomed to the technologies? What is it that we're seeing with that growth?
So I can speak to just the Influx DB side.
Yeah.
Obviously, we created the project in the fall of 2013. And since then, we've seen adoption around the world. So we have essentially in the open source software a tracker that phones home once initially it was 24 hours, then we updated it to 4 hours that just says, hey, I'm a server out there in the world running, and it tells us what operating system and what hardware it's running on, so we can kind of get an idea of where the open source software is running. And at this stage, there are, depending on the day, anywhere from 500,000 to 800,000 different servers running out there in the world. And those are the ones we actually have visibility on, right? Running Influx DB itself. And we've seen, over time, when we started, time series wasn't really a database category. I knew about it from my time in fintech, but time series, I think, has really gathered adoption as a category with more people implementing time series databases. Amazon obviously introduced their first version of TimesTream back in
2018.
2018, yeah. So, and we've seen a bunch of other time series databases along the way, and Influx DB, we've continued to try and innovate and have new versions of it with new functionality, and we've consistently seen growth all along.
So you were talking a little bit about the growth. What are some of the dynamics of that growth that you're seeing?
I think, one aspect is, what I was talking about earlier in terms of all the different problems that are well suited towards using time series approaches. And so between operational use cases, sensor data, IoT data. We see a lot of use cases where customers want to monitor video quality streaming. So say you're doing a live broadcast and you want to understand the customer experience. Using a time series can be a great way to do that. Low Earth orbit satellites, all these kinds of things that we see as innovations, really also drive new time series use cases. So the growth in the number of time series use cases is a large part of what we see. And for TimesTen for InfluxDB, we really see as customers who really love the open source aspect of it, but would like to have it as a managed service, with that pure kind of open source side. And that's really where we see that as a starting point for a lot of TimesTen for InfluxDB customers.
So what do you mean by, in your context, the managed service for open source? Is that Amazon doing the heavy lifting?
So the value that Amazon provides for InfluxDB in our managed offering is that we provision the instances for you. We handle the backups. We give you an option to do multi-AZ, high availability. Obviously, we have some security controls that we use in a shared responsibility model. So compared to setting it up for yourself and running it in production, AWS will handle those pieces for you, and you can still get the open source time series database software that you know and love from InfluxDB.
So tell me about the particulars of how you're fitting things together. How is this working? How would the user see it?
So we did this in conjunction with Influx Data, and from a user's perspective, if they're using InfluxDB 2.x or 2.6, I believe now, then they can use the TimesTream service and have that sort of open source API compatibility. There's also options where if they want to, within the AWS console, which is how customers interact with AWS services, if they want to look at, moving to Influx Data's managed service, they have a link to be able to do that if they need different scale or performance qualities. And then over time, we'll work with Influx Data to offer additional functionality to the open source that they can provide through the AWS console. So we think it's beneficial for customers in that they can use the open source software it is, and they can also benefit through innovations and improvements that Influx Data will deliver over time.
I would say the way we view it is as I had mentioned, we have this visibility into a bunch of people around the world running Influx DB. And obviously we don't have 500,000 customers. I would love for that to be the case, but that is not the case. Partnering with Amazon means that a lot of those people running that open source software that we've created can get a fully managed experience where they otherwise wouldn't, right? And it gives us the opportunity to create, additional commercial offerings that are available with us directly, but also with Amazon. And we think that's kind of basically just like a force multiplier on what we'll be able to do in the time series space.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, we're going to be able to do more if we're partnered with large players like Amazon to get InfluxDB out into the world, because our goal ultimately is to create the best possible time series database we can and get it broadly available to as many people as we can.
Now, Amazon Web Services is a cloud services provider, and you're a software provider, and there's an on-premise component to this. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
So we offer software as an on-prem product where people can just buy the software and run it themselves. Right. So version 1 of our products, that actually represents a pretty sizable portion of our business right now.
Right.
And many of those customers actually run that software within Amazon, but they also run it in their own data centers and on the other cloud providers. For version 2, we actually currently don't offer a commercial offering of version 2. So for version 2, the best option right now is to go to Amazon for this hosted service.
Okay.
Now, for version 3, we currently have a hosted commercial offering, and then we're working on another release of version 3 that we hope will be available with Amazon in due time.
One of the on-premise is one of the reasons that customers really like managed or open source databases in general, because they can run one version on their premises, and then as a managed service they know what that version is, they understand how to work with it, they can move between them for where it makes sense within their application.
I think that's also actually something that's quite unique to this use case. Is one of the things we see in time series data, particularly in manufacturing, power, mining operations, like all sorts of like industrial equipment kind of things, is people will have a need for a centralized cloud solution, which obviously Amazon can provide, but they also have a need to run on the factory floor, like within, they'll just have like a rack of servers in the factory or on location, and they want to be able to run an on-premise installation of, say, Influx DB that collects data and stores data in very high precision locally, with the ability to either send it up to the cloud in full precision or downsampled into lower precision data. And that blend of on-prem paired with cloud is very much part of our long-term strategy.
And one of the things that we really found very appealing was what Influx Data has built is they have a really rich ecosystem. I think it's the talk ecosystem, where you can, Influx connectors, where if you have something that's producing data, there's probably a connector in a language that you already know, so that you can very easily send data, to your Influx DB instance, and that really helps with, adoption and helps with, a range of the different use cases and applications.
Yeah, so we have a data collector that we created called Telegraf, and that's basically an open source component that people can deploy on their servers, in their systems, and it can get data from a variety of sources, a bunch of different well-known services or things like Kinesis and Kafka, but it can also integrate with things like in the industrial space like OPC UA to collect data from actual machines and pull it into the database.
So what are some of the other major use cases you see emerging?
So we've seen a lot recently in rockets, satellites, all that kind of stuff, basically tracking the telemetry from launches, tracking the telemetry as satellites orbit the Earth. That's a big one. There are industrial cases, like I said.
From SpaceX or from?
They are not a customer directly.
But are there a lot of rockets being deployed?
There's actually...
There's a lot of constellations of low Earth orbit satellites that fly around and need a lot of telemetry.
Yeah, there are new rocket companies being started all the time, and there are also different launch management companies and stuff like that, and there are a lot of new satellite communications companies going up. Telecommunications is another thing. There's some wireless companies that use it. Basically, I'm not sure which customers I can talk about publicly.
Customers. You don't need to. Just the sector's fine.
Yeah, so those are all interesting. Like I said, we're starting to see more on factory floors where basically you'll instrument a production line. Now, traditionally, these are called industrial historians. That's the target audience. And those people traditionally haven't been software people. They've been, manufacturing people. They know how to work with machines and stuff like that. But they've been going more and more towards open source solutions, and they're essentially moving from these old school, industrial historian software packages to open source things like Influx DB to get higher precision of data on all the machines in the factories that they're implementing.
Yeah, and other things we've seen, if you ever watched Amazon NFL Thursday on Prime Video, they monitor the video quality that I talked about earlier using a time series database, using TimesTream. And so as they're understanding your experience as you're watching the game, and there's a number of those kinds of use cases that we see as well.
Yeah, so we have multiple streaming companies that use Influx DB to track the quality of streams and stuff like that. And it's the same, it's interesting because from a data perspective, that is actually the same kind of use case as tracking network quality in wireless communications. We also have some customers in high frequency trading that track their network quality because they have data centers distributed around the world, and they try to guarantee clock drift to within 300 nanoseconds. So they use InfluxDB actually allows you to write a nanosecond timestamp. So we do have some customers that actually use that for those purposes.
A nanosecond timestamp. Wow.
I learned something today. That's
cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of timestamps, but I haven't heard of nanosecond timestamps.
Yeah,
and those are just needed for the volume and the speed of the data.
It's basically just about the precision of it, right? So I've seen this in two different use cases. One is high frequency trading, right, where actually microseconds count, and if you can actually make something faster by 50 microseconds,
Right.
then you could potentially like get a better trade. And then the other is experiments in like physics and stuff like that. So they don't take action in nanoseconds, right, which is basically a billionth of a second.
Right.
But they measure things in that, and then later when they're doing analysis, they can determine whether or not they're hitting their SLOs and that kind of thing.
What are the analysis tools that they're using with Influx and and Amazon?
Well, InfluxDB has a number of different built-in kind of
built-in
dashboarding pieces.
dashboards.
We often see customers using Grafana in conjunction with Influx, and there's a number of other things that customers build on top of it.
So is there an added complexity that comes with your integration in terms for the user experience? Is it really not? Is it really separated? Are the technologies separated? Are they integrated? I'm trying to understand
Think of it as really we're providing a managed service
on
for
top
what,
of
many of the things that we offer you could do yourself, but we
Okay.
don't have we do it so you don't have to. So you can really focus on analyzing your time series data, or really spending time, building what's important to your business and not operating the database. And so in fact it's quite easy to take a InfluxDB instance you have running locally, take a snapshot and restore it onto one of our managed service instances.
So the user doesn't have to understand some underlying new technology to use the combined service?
No,
No.
not at all.
No. So if you're an Influx user, what are you getting that you didn't get before by working with Timeframe?
So if your hardware fails,
Yeah.
we automatically replace it for you. If you need a backup, we
Just
take
for
that
cloud-
automatically
as a cloud service
service provider.
Yeah.
So you get all the benefits, from a managed hardware managing, patching, network security pieces that you don't have to do yourself.
So is this in the end more of a partnership than anything? And basically, if I'm an Influx user, I can use Influx, but I can also use Timeframe, or I'm trying to understand how that relationship extends to the user themselves.
So I see this as absolutely a partnership. It's a partnership where our customers are both better off, for us working together. So, Influx data customers get the benefit of managed service that we talked about, and then, they also get the benefit of innovations that Influx data is delivering as well.
So there's not any new user interface that they need to get used to or anything in that regard.
No. Because it's generally they're probably already Amazon customers, so they're familiar with the Amazon console for getting everything set up. And then within Influx itself, it's the same InfluxDB2 user experience that they're probably already accustomed to.
What have customers been saying about this? Have you talked to them about it? What are they saying to you?
As I'm sure you know, we work backwards from our customers.
Yeah.
And so we kind of, even before we launched this, we talked to a number of customers who were running open source InfluxDB instances. And, what they said is that they loved InfluxDB. They liked its capabilities, they liked the open source APIs, they liked the performance, but they didn't like managing it. And so that's kind of where, that's how we started out. And so
That's where you are.
before we launched, we actually ran what we internally call a private beta. We had several kind of energy company customers and several others who gave us feedback. They've been excited about it. And so far it's been very popular. People are still early. We launched, I think, on the 14th of March, just over a month. And we've had a number of customers try it out, and customers are starting to go into production. So, so I think the early feedback is really positive. And we think if you're interested in running open source InfluxDB2 at this point, we think that it's the best place for you to do it.
So what's next for y'all?
Working on version 3, on the first release of open source version 3, and hopefully soon thereafter a community edition, which is what we'll be working with Amazon to provide. And
we're working on expanding the regional availability for the service. There's some additional features, in terms of helping customers who want to bring their own encryption keys and other kinds of features that, are helpful within the cloud environment. So we're continuing to make, really to make it so that, everywhere where there's an AWS region, you can reliably run sort of InfluxDB as a managed service, and then make that managed service better over time and bring you the innovations and bring customers the innovations that are coming out from Influx data.
If you were going to list 3 things as customers would like offloaded from their work to be managed, what would they be?
Backups, multi-AZ configurations, and hardware replacements, patching.
What are some of the things that you're hearing from customers, things that they want from a managed service?
from a managed service or from InfluxDB generally?
Well, I guess InfluxDB.
Yeah, so from InfluxDB, Again, this goes to the reasons why we created version 3, which is they want infinite cardinality of the time series data so they can basically capture arbitrary levels of precision on the observations that they're making. They want to be able to use cheap object storage as the historical store of record, basically, right? Because right now, version 2 of InfluxDB, you have to use an expensive, EBS volume with SSD and provisioned IOPS, right? And the thing is, for these use cases, time series data has a lot of value when it's very new, right? The first few hours, the first 7 days, and they want the historical data accessible, but they don't want to pay the same price. So that is a big piece, basically figuring out how to make the whole system work using object store as the historical record, but keeping that real-time query capability. Another big one we heard was SQL capabilities, right? So version 1 and version 2 of InfluxDB had InfluxQL and then Flux, which was our scripting language. And people wanted to work with SQL, right? The language they know. And they wanted more, like SQL has more non-time series, like analytic functions that they wanted to be able to use. So version 3 has all of that. And then one of the other things I'm actually excited about for version 3 is because of the way we're building it, we intend to support Apache Iceberg, which is a catalog format, and then on the persistence layer using Apache Parquet as the file format on object storage. And basically what that means is that users of version 3 of InfluxDB will be able to effortlessly use other systems like Athena and Redshift and other like big data analytic query engines to pull data out of InfluxDB without any kind of ETL or anything like that.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
So it's basically like broader ecosystem compatibility.
So the data story is unfolding really here.
Yeah.
And the real-time data streaming, the ability to use Apache projects like Parquet.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for taking some time.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.